Border Force staff are going to strike for 10 days over Christmas in airports and ports across the UK. That was just one of the announcements made a few moments ago. Let's talk about them more with the General Secretary of the PCS Union, Mark Serwotka. He joins us now live from South London. Mr. Serwotka, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Let's just have a little recap of the announcements that you made, because there were a lot of them affecting a lot of different areas. What are the main areas of strike action that people at home can expect over Christmas from your union?
Well, what we've confirmed today is that industrial action starts next week. It will involve people working in the Rural Payments Agency. We've then got strikes in the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency. That's people who take driving tests for 5 weeks that start next week. We've got industrial action on national highways with road traffic officers that will take 10 days of action, 6 of which will take place at the same time as strikes on the railway. We've got strikes in some DWP offices in the Merseyside and in Yorkshire, and the announcement we've just confirmed earlier on is the Border Force staff will be taking industrial action across. It's just one port at the moment, which is the Port of Newhaven, but at the airports in Glasgow, Cardiff, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Gatwick, and all terminals at Heathrow over the Christmas period.
Mark, you know the question that I'm going to ask you next, Mark Serwotka, just looking at, you pointed out yourself in your press conference that you've deliberately coordinated strikes for the Highways Agency and the National Highways Agency to coincide with rail strikes. You've just told us about Border Force dates in December, possibly running into January. So that's passport control. So that's air, rail and road over Christmas. People watching, you've ruined their Christmas. How are they going to get anywhere this Christmas, whether it's to work at a vital time in this cost of living crisis, or whether it's to see family and friends?
Well, the people we represent who are striking, their Christmas has already been ruined because 40,000 of them use food banks, 45,000 of them have to claim benefits. The average wage is £23,000 a year, and yet these people pay out benefits to the public, keep our justice system running, our ports and our airports, and so much more. The government has given them 2%. When inflation is at 11%, and actually it's at 16% for the poorest people that we're representing. People are desperate. We've given a government dossier, we've given a dossier to the government of 170 pages of testimonies of our members who are not feeding their families properly, they don't put the lights on, they can't afford to get to work, they are desperate, they're in despair. Therefore, their industrial action is asking for more money to be put on the table so that they can have a half-decent Christmas at this terrible time. And this strike would not happen if Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt just accepted one plain fact. It can't be right that people they employ are using food banks and claiming benefits. If they put money on the table, all of these strikes can be called off.
Mr. Serwotka, I'm just going to put to you a message I've had on social media from a viewer called Dave Morrison. And, a lot of people are going to say, look, people are in the same situation as your union members up and down the UK. What you're doing is spreading the misery. You're making it harder for everyone. This is Dave Morrison. He said, how does the PCS union expect for this money to be paid to staff? The unions want us to pay more tax. Massive pay rises mean higher and longer inflation. The unions are trying to hold the country to ransom. I think that, in a nutshell, the argument he's trying to make is there just isn't the money at the moment. The government haven't got the money. Everyone on strike, the government can't give everyone a pay rise. It would bankrupt the country.
Yeah, and obviously that's wrong, and that's economically wrong, and all economists understand that. The current problems are caused by this government. They crashed the economy. They are the ones who are responsible for the difficulties we're in. Yet they're expecting the people, whether they're paramedics, job centre workers, teachers or nurses, to pay a price that they cannot afford to pay for the government's own folly. What the government could easily do is to sit down and to talk about distributing money now, because there's a crisis of poverty of our public servants that needs to be dealt with now. And that's why this is a far more serious issue for public sector workers than just whether there's some short-term disruption. And Dave's anger should be directed at Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. They have the power to stop all of these strikes today, but they refuse to do so. And that's why we're seeing not just my own union, but dozens of unions constantly announcing strikes because the people we represent are at breaking point and they are struggling and they need money now to pay the bills.
Yeah, I very much get your point. You know, we're looking at perhaps 2 million workers striking over the festive period. I was talking to the General Secretary of the Unison Union yesterday, who painted a very similar picture for those who are in her union using food banks, living on the poverty line. But just how bad is this going to get? Because you said in your press conference, this will escalate until the government puts money on the table. How far are you prepared to go? Because the General Secretary of Unison said to us yesterday that, you know, the government says the door is open, and the door is open for everything to be talked about apart from money. They're not talking about money.
And that is absolutely true. And I made the point today, the door may be open, but there's nothing behind the door. And there's no point turning up to meetings with ministers that last 20 minutes where they don't do anything to resolve the disputes. In relation to my own union, PCS, the action we've announced today probably covers in the region of 2,000 to 3,000 members, but we have 100,000 members who've balloted to take strike action. So there's plenty of scope for us to escalate further. But we know that 500,000 teachers are currently balloting. We know that health workers are taking action. So it's inevitable that more and more workers will go on strike if the government do not do something about what is a crisis of poverty and lack of resource in our frontline services. If they sit down and find the money to alleviate some of this poverty, these strikes can stop. But if they don't, our union is going to stand alongside all the others to say we have to stand up for our members. Action is a last resort, but if we don't do this, this poverty will go on and on and on.
We've just had a statement in from Heathrow Airport in reaction to your announcement saying to the public that are travelling with them this Christmas that, look, on strike days, checks may take longer. Is that a conservative estimate of what's going to happen? How bad are things going to be over Christmas in terms of if you want the public to listen and pay attention to what you're doing and, as you said, redirect their anger and frustration, because everyone's feeling the pinch, whether you're a member of a union or not, you want them to direct their anger at the government. So just how bad are things going to get?
Yeah, I do think people should direct their anger at the government because they have the ability to stop all of these strikes straight away. Clearly, the action is going to cause a lot of disruption. The government says it's going to bring the army in to our airports. They're going to bring the army in, apparently, to drive ambulances. The solution is not to try to bring the army in to give cover when they're not properly trained. It is to sit down and recognise that millions of public sector workers who love the jobs that they do in serving the public would not be taking strike action unless they were desperate. And if the government do not heed that call, this action, I think, will grow with more unions voting to strike and more unions working together to make it as effective as possible. OK, Mark Serwotka, General Secretary of the Public and Commercial Services Union, thank you for talking to us here on Sky News this afternoon.